My name is Johan, and if you saw me on the street, you probably wouldn't think twice about me. I'm an ordinary guy, with a job as a warehouse worker, a small house in the suburbs, and a quiet life that's been the same for as long as I can remember. My days are predictable. I wake up at 6, throw on my uniform, and head to the warehouse, where I spend hours moving boxes, loading trucks, and counting inventory. When my shift ends, I come home to my wife, Klara, who is the one truly extraordinary part of my otherwise simple existence. Klara is my world. She's smart, funny, and so full of life that just being around her makes me feel like I've won some cosmic lottery. She works at this upscale store downtown, a place I can only describe as the kind of shop where rich people go to buy things they don't really need. It's all designer clothes, luxury handbags, and overpriced jewelry. But what really stands out are the people. Everyone who works there seems like they've stepped out of a magazine. The men are sharp and confident, the women stylish and radiant. And Klara? She fits right in. When she comes home at night, she always has a story to tell. There's a mischievous sparkle in her eyes as she talks about her colleagues and the customers she met that day. She'll laugh about how one of her co-workers couldn't stop flirting with everyone in sight or how a client made some ridiculous demand. I sit there, captivated, as she describes it all with the kind of energy that only she can bring. It's clear that she loves her job, not just the work, but the people, the interactions, the excitement of being part of a fast-paced, glamorous world. And every time she talks about it, I can't help but notice how alive she looks, how she glows. At first, I didn't think much of it. I loved hearing her stories and seeing her happy. But then, those stories started to take root in my mind. I began to imagine her in those moments, surrounded by those people, her smile lighting up the room. I pictured her joking with her colleagues, catching someone's eye across the store, maybe even letting her guard down a little. The more I thought about it, the more it fascinated me. It wasn't jealousy I felt, it was pride. Klara was magnetic, irresistible, and I wanted the whole world to see it. And then there was the part that excited me the most, the idea of her coming home and telling me about it. I pictured her sitting across from me, recounting every detail of her day, her voice full of excitement, her eyes sparkling as she let me in on every little moment. It wasn't just a fantasy about her, it was a fantasy about us, about how much closer we could become if we shared something so raw and open. But how could I tell her? How do you look the woman you love in the eye and say, "Hey, I think you should flirt with other people because it makes me happy"? It sounded insane, even to me. I worried she'd laugh, or worse, think something was wrong with me. For weeks, I kept it to myself, unsure of how to even bring it up. But the idea wouldn't leave me. It stayed there, growing stronger, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. One Saturday evening, as we sat together at the kitchen table, I decided it was now or never. Klara was scrolling through her phone, her hair falling in soft waves around her face. She looked so at ease, so beautiful, that my chest tightened. I cleared my throat, and she glanced up, her warm brown eyes meeting mine. "Klara," I said, my voice shaking just enough to betray how nervous I was. "There's something I want to talk to you about." She put down her phone, giving me her full attention. "What is it?" she asked, her tone gentle but curious. "You look like you've got something serious on your mind." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hands were gripping my coffee cup so tightly that I worried it might crack. I have a fantasy," I began, my words slow and deliberate. "And it's something I've been thinking about for a while. I know it might sound strange, but I need you to hear me out." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked more intrigued, like she was ready to dive into whatever I was about to say. That gave me the courage to keep going. "I've been thinking about how much I love hearing your stories about work," I said. "The way you talk about your colleagues, the energy in your voice, it makes me so happy to see you like that. And, well, I started to imagine you in those moments. I pictured you being free, letting yourself enjoy the attention you get, maybe even flirting a little." I paused, watching for her reaction. She didn't flinch, didn't interrupt. So, I pressed on. "I know it's not a normal thing to say," I admitted. "But the thought of you being admired, of you coming home and telling me all about it, it excites me. It makes me feel proud of you, of us." And I can't stop thinking about how incredible it would be to share that with you." When I finished, the room went silent. My heart was pounding so hard that I was sure she could hear it. I felt like I was dangling on the edge of a cliff, waiting for her to either pull me back or push me over. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "That's unexpected," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "But honestly, it's kind of interesting. You're serious about this?" I nodded, my throat too tight to form words. "I am," I managed to say after a moment. "Not because I want anything to change between us, but because I love you. I love the idea of us exploring something new together." Klara leaned back in her chair, her eyes thoughtful. Then, to my amazement, she reached across the table and took my hand in hers. "If this is your dream," she said softly, "then I'm willing to try." Her words hit me like a wave of relief. My shoulders sagged, the tension melting away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Klara, my Klara, was not only willing to listen but ready to join me on this journey. As I looked at her, my heart swelled with a mix of love and anticipation. This was just the beginning, but I already knew we were on the verge of something extraordinary. Together, we were about to step into uncharted territory, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead us. I couldn't stop thinking about Klara's response. For days, it echoed in my mind, "If this is your dream, then I'm willing to try." She had taken my wild, unspoken fantasy and turned it into a possibility. The idea that we were about to embark on something entirely new filled me with both excitement and nervousness. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about us. Klara approached it with the same poise and thoughtfulness she applied to everything in life. Over the next few evenings, we sat together and talked, hashing out every detail. What would this look like? What were the boundaries? How would we make sure we stayed connected and honest through it all? She asked questions I hadn't even considered, making it clear that she wasn't just agreeing to this for me, she wanted to understand it for herself too. One night, as we sat on the couch with a bottle of wine between us, she finally said, "If we're going to do this, I need to feel like I'm in control. It has to be on my terms. Are you okay with that?" I nodded without hesitation. "Of course," I said. "This is about you, Klara. I want you to feel empowered, not pressured. We'll go as far as you're comfortable." She smiled, a little mischievous, and swirled her wineglass thoughtfully. "All right," she said. "Then let's start small. Something simple." Her plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Klara decided she would go out one evening after work, maybe for drinks with her colleagues or just to a nearby bar. She would let herself be open, free to engage with whoever she wanted. Flirting was fine, encouraged, even, but nothing beyond that. And, of course, she would tell me everything when she got home. I'll admit, the thought of it made my heart race. I wasn't sure how I would feel in the moment, jealous, excited, or both, but I trusted Klara completely. More than that, I trusted us. The day of her first outing felt surreal. Klara had always been beautiful, but that evening, she looked absolutely stunning. She wore a fitted black dress that hugged her figure just enough to be elegant yet playful. Her makeup was subtle but highlighted her best features, her warm brown eyes, her soft, inviting lips. When she came out of the bedroom, I couldn't take my eyes off her. "What do you think?" she asked, spinning playfully to show off the dress. "You're breathtaking," I said, and I meant it. "You're going to have every man in the room falling over themselves to talk to you." She laughed, but there was a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. "It's a little nerve-wracking, you know," she admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." I stepped closer and took her hands in mine. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," I reminded her. "This is just for fun. And no matter what happens, I'll be right here, waiting for you." That seemed to ease her nerves. She gave me a kiss, soft and lingering, then grabbed her purse. "All right," she said with a determined smile. "Let's see how this goes." I watched her leave, my stomach a knot of anticipation and excitement. For the first time, I was about to experience this fantasy as a reality. It was thrilling, yes, but also uncharted territory. I spent the next few hours pacing the living room, unable to focus on anything. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Klara with an update. Finally, around midnight, I heard her key in the door. I rushed to meet her, trying to play it cool but failing miserably. She stepped inside, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling. "Well?" I asked, unable to hide my curiosity. "How was it?" Klara slipped off her heels and set down her purse before answering. "It was interesting," she said, a teasing smile tugging at her lips. I gestured for her to sit down, and we settled on the couch. She took a moment, as if gathering her thoughts, then began to recount the evening. She told me how she had gone to a small bar near her workplace, a cozy spot where people from the area often gathered after hours. She ordered a glass of wine and found a seat at the bar, intentionally leaving herself open to conversation. It didn't take long for someone to approach her, a man, confident and well-dressed, who struck up a conversation about the wine she was drinking. He was charming, Klara admitted, her eyes glinting with amusement. A little too smooth, maybe, but he knew how to keep the conversation going. She described how they talked about work, hobbies, and the city, the man occasionally throwing in light compliments that made her smile. At one point, he touched her arm, a small, casual gesture, but one that lingered in her mind. "And how did that feel?" I asked, leaning in. "It was nice," she said, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Not in a way that made me uncomfortable. It was just flattering." Hearing her recount the details was electrifying. I hung on every word, imagining the scene as vividly as if I had been there myself. She told me how the man eventually asked if she wanted to join him and his friends at their table, but she politely declined, saying she had somewhere to be. "I didn't want to push it too far on the first night," she explained. "But it felt good, Johan. Being out there, letting myself enjoy the moment, it was exciting." Her words sent a wave of emotion through me. Pride, happiness, and a strange, almost euphoric sense of fulfillment. This was everything I had imagined, and more. Klara had embraced the moment, and now she was sharing it with me in a way that felt raw and intimate. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For doing this. For trusting me." She smiled and reached for my hand. "This is about us, Johan," she said. "And I trust you completely." That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. It was only the first step, but it already felt like we were on a journey that would bring us closer than ever before. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly alive. The days following Klara's first outing felt like an electric current running through our lives. I couldn't stop replaying her words, imagining her there at the bar, radiant and confident, her laughter lighting up the room. The way she described the evening stirred something deep inside me, a mix of pride, excitement, and a strange but wonderful sense of connection. It wasn't just about what she had done, it was about how openly and honestly she had shared it with me. Klara, too, seemed different. There was a new energy about her, a confidence that hadn't been there before. She carried herself with an ease that made her even more captivating. I noticed it in the little things, the way she smiled when she caught me looking at her, the playful way she teased me about how attentive I'd become. If I had any doubts about this journey we were on, they were fading fast. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, Klara brought up the idea of trying again. "I've been thinking about the other night," she said, twirling a strand of her hair around her finger. "It was fun. But I feel like I barely scratched the surface." "What do you mean?" I asked, setting down my glass of wine. She shrugged, her eyes sparkling. "I think I could be bolder. Let myself enjoy it a little more. If you're okay with that." "Of course, I'm okay with it," I said without hesitation. "This is all about what you're comfortable with." She smiled, leaning forward to rest her hand on mine. "I'm comfortable," she said softly. "In fact, I'm starting to really enjoy this." Her words sent a rush of excitement through me. It was happening. Klara was not just willing to explore this, but actively embracing it. The thought of what might come next made my pulse quicken. A few days later, Klara made her move. She told me there was a small after-work event at her store, a casual gathering at a nearby lounge to celebrate a successful sales month. It was the perfect opportunity to take the next step. She promised to keep me updated and, most importantly, share everything with me afterward. That evening, as she got ready, I felt the same mixture of anticipation and nervousness as before. Klara chose a deep red dress this time, one that hugged her body in all the right places without being overly revealing. She paired it with black heels and simple gold jewelry. As she stood in front of the mirror applying her lipstick, she glanced at me through the reflection. "You look like you're about to burst," she teased. "Relax, Johan. It's just another night out." "You're stunning," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "They won't be able to take their eyes off you." She laughed, walking over to give me a kiss on the cheek. "I'll text you," she promised, grabbing her purse and heading out the door. The hours that followed were agonizingly slow. I paced the living room, checked my phone every few minutes, and even tried distracting myself with a movie, but nothing could take my mind off Klara. What was happening? Who was she talking to? Was she enjoying herself? Finally, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Klara. "You'd love this. Everyone's in such a good mood. There's a guy here who's been buying drinks for the whole group. Charming, but a little cocky." I grinned, quickly typing a response. "I want to hear everything. Keep me posted." Over the next couple of hours, her updates painted a vivid picture of the night. She told me about the lively conversations, the laughter, and the way her coworkers loosened up as the drinks kept flowing. Then came the message that made my heart skip a beat. "The guy I mentioned earlier, he's sitting with me now. We're talking about travel. He's been to some amazing places." I could almost picture it, Klara, radiant in her red dress, her smile captivating as she leaned in to listen to this man's stories. The thought filled me with a strange, intoxicating mix of emotions. Jealousy, yes, but also pride. She was thriving, enjoying herself, and that's what I had wanted all along. A little after midnight, she came home. I met her at the door, eager to hear everything. Klara stepped inside, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. "Well?" I asked, unable to hide my curiosity. "How was it?" "It was incredible," she said, slipping off her heels. "Let's sit. I have so much to tell you." We settled on the couch, and she began recounting the evening in vivid detail. She told me about the man, how he had a natural charm and a way of making everyone around him feel at ease. They had talked about everything from their favorite movies to their dream vacations. He had complimented her, not just on her appearance but on her intelligence and wit. "And how did that make you feel?" I asked, hanging on every word. She smiled, a little shyly. "It felt good. Really good. It's been a long time since someone's looked at me like that, like I'm the most interesting person in the room." Hearing her say that stirred something deep inside me. I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You deserve that," I said. "You are the most interesting person in any room." She laughed softly, leaning her head against my shoulder. "Thank you, Johan. For trusting me with this. For letting me be me." That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying her words. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just about my fantasy, it was about Klara finding a new side of herself, a side that had been waiting for permission to shine. And for me, it was about discovering just how deeply we could trust and connect with each other. We were only just beginning, but already, it felt like we had unlocked something extraordinary. After that night, things between Klara and me felt more alive than ever. The air around us was charged with something new, an intimacy born from trust, openness, and shared excitement. We talked more, laughed more, and even the smallest moments felt deeper, richer. Every time Klara recounted her stories, I felt like I was stepping into her world, seeing her through the eyes of others, and falling in love with her all over again. But as incredible as it was, I could sense that Klara was holding back. She had dipped her toes into this new experience, but there was a part of her that was curious to dive deeper. I could see it in the way she talked about her evenings out, in the questions she asked me about my feelings. One night, as we were lying in bed, she finally voiced what I had been suspecting. "Johan," she said softly, her head resting on my chest. Can I ask you something? Of course, I replied, brushing my fingers through her hair. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if I went further? She hesitated, as if gauging my reaction. Not just flirting. Something more. Her question sent a jolt through me. I had thought about it, of course, more times than I cared to admit. The idea of Klara exploring her desires, stepping beyond the boundaries we had set, was thrilling in ways I could barely put into words. But I hadn't wanted to push her. This had to be her choice, her journey. I've thought about it, I admitted, my voice steady. But only if it's something you want. This isn't about me pushing you, Klara. It's about you finding what feels right. She lifted her head to look at me, her eyes searching mine. I don't know how far I'd want to go, she said honestly. But I feel like there's more to explore. And I want to do it with you, Johan. I want you to be part of it. Her words sent a rush of emotion through me. This wasn't just about fulfilling a fantasy anymore, it was about deepening our connection, stepping into uncharted territory together. I cupped her face in my hands and kissed her gently. Then let's do it, I said. Whatever you're ready for, we'll do it together. The opportunity came sooner than we expected. Klara's store was hosting a company party to celebrate a major milestone, and she invited me to come along. It was a formal event at a swanky hotel, with champagne, live music, and plenty of mingling. Klara saw it as the perfect chance to test the waters. I want you to be there, she said as she got ready that evening. Not just as my husband, but as a witness. I want you to see what happens, how I feel, and how we feel together. I couldn't say no. The thought of watching her in action, seeing her charm and confidence up close, was exhilarating. That night, she wore a stunning emerald green dress that flowed elegantly as she moved, paired with sparkling earrings and heels that made her legs look endless. I couldn't take my eyes off her. You're going to be the most beautiful woman there, I said as we left the house. She laughed, her eyes gleaming. Flattery will get you everywhere, Johan. The party was in full swing when we arrived. The grand ballroom buzzed with energy, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. Klara greeted her colleagues with ease, her presence magnetic. I hung back, letting her take the spotlight, content to watch from the edges of the room. It didn't take long for the attention to find her. A man approached her, a tall, charismatic guy with an easy smile and an air of confidence. I recognized him from her stories. Daniel, one of the senior managers at the store. He had always been friendly with her, but tonight, there was something different in the way he looked at her, something more intentional. I watched as they began to talk, their body language open and relaxed. Klara laughed at something he said, her head tilting back slightly, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more like awe. She was radiant, magnetic, completely in her element. As the evening went on, I noticed Daniel's attention never wavered. He found reasons to stay close to her, to keep the conversation going. And Klara, to my surprise and delight, leaned into it. She wasn't just being polite, she was engaging, playful, even a little flirtatious. At one point, she caught my eye from across the room. Her gaze held mine for a moment, and she gave me the slightest smile. It was a signal, a reminder that we were in this together. I nodded, giving her my silent encouragement. Later, as the party began to wind down, I saw Klara and Daniel step out onto the balcony. My heart raced as I followed discreetly, keeping my distance but staying close enough to observe. They stood there, framed by the city lights, their voices low but animated. And then it happened. Daniel leaned in, his hand brushing her arm, his intention clear. Klara didn't pull away. Instead, she smiled a small, knowing smile and said something that made him laugh. She didn't stop him when he moved closer, his hand now resting lightly on her waist. For a moment, I felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. And yet, I didn't feel excluded. This was exactly what we had talked about, exactly what we had agreed on. Klara was exploring, and I was there to witness it, to support her. When they finally stepped back inside, Klara made her way over to me. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Ready to go home? She asked, her voice light. I nodded, unable to suppress a smile. Yeah, I said. Let's go. On the drive home, Klara was quiet, her gaze thoughtful. When we got inside, she kicked off her heels and turned to face me. I want to tell you everything, she said, her voice soft. But first, I need to know, are you okay? I stepped closer, taking her hands in mine. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm proud of you, Klara. And I can't wait to hear every detail. She smiled, a little shyly, and led me to the couch. As she began to recount the evening, her voice filled with excitement and curiosity, I realized that we had taken another step forward, deeper into this journey. It wasn't just about her or me anymore, it was about us, about discovering who we were together in this new and uncharted territory. After the night of the party, everything between Klara and me felt different, richer, more alive. She was glowing, more confident than I had ever seen her. And me? I felt closer to her than I thought possible. Each step we took together in this journey was like uncovering a new layer of who we were as a couple. But with that closeness came something unexpected, the realization that we were approaching a turning point. It started with Klara's honesty. She told me everything about the conversation on the balcony, how Daniel had leaned in, how his hand had lingered on her waist. She admitted that she had felt the pull of something new, something thrilling. But she also told me she had held back, unsure of how far she wanted to go. I was tempted, she confessed one night as we lay in bed, her head resting on my shoulder. Not because I wanted anything more with him, but because it felt exciting. It felt like I was discovering a new side of myself. Her words struck a chord in me. This was no longer just about my fantasy. It was about her finding freedom, exploring parts of herself that had been tucked away in the routine of daily life. And as much as it thrilled me to hear about her experiences, I knew we were standing on the edge of something bigger. What would you do, I asked carefully, if there were no limits? If you could go as far as you wanted? She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. I don't know, she admitted. But I think I'd like to find out. With you. Her answer filled me with a mix of excitement and apprehension. We had come so far already, and now, the possibility of going further loomed large. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. But above all, it felt right. The next opportunity came unexpectedly. Klara told me one evening that Daniel had invited her to join a group of co-workers for drinks after work. It wasn't unusual, they often went out as a team to unwind. But this time, she asked me a question that took my breath away. Would you want me to explore a little more? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes searching mine. Not just flirting. Maybe, letting things happen. Her openness stunned me. I could see that she wasn't asking lightly. She was giving me the chance to decide, to either step forward with her or pull back. If that's what you want, I said, choosing my words carefully, then yes. But only if you're completely sure. We can stop at any time. Klara nodded, her expression calm but resolute. I am sure, she said. I'll keep you updated. And I'll tell you everything, as always. That evening, as she got ready, the air between us was thick with anticipation. She chose a sleek black dress with a high slit and paired it with her favorite heels. As she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her earrings, I couldn't help but admire her. She looked breathtaking, confident, and completely in control. I'll be thinking about you, she said, turning to kiss me before heading out. And I'll be waiting, I replied, my voice low but steady. The hours crawled by after she left. My phone buzzed a few times with updates. We're at the bar now. Daniel's here. He's been talking to me all evening. He just bought me a drink. We're sitting at a table, just the two of us. Each message painted a vivid picture in my mind, and I found myself hanging on her every word. Then came the message that made my heart race. We're leaving. Just the two of us. I'll text you when I can. I stared at my phone, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I trusted Klara completely, but this was uncharted territory. The thought of her alone with Daniel filled me with both nervous anticipation and a strange, exhilarating pride. She was stepping into something new, something we had both agreed on, and I was ready to support her. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Klara came home. I had been sitting on the couch, waiting, my thoughts running wild. When I heard the key in the lock, I stood up, my heart pounding. She stepped inside, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly tousled. She looked at me, her eyes bright and filled with emotion. "Well?" I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Klara slipped off her heels and set down her purse. She walked over to me, her movements slow and deliberate, and placed her hands on my chest. "It was incredible," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But before I tell you everything, I need to know, are you okay?" Her question brought a lump to my throat. I nodded, placing my hands over hers. "I'm okay," I said. "I want to hear everything." "I'm proud of you, Klara." She smiled, her eyes glistening, and led me to the couch. As we sat down, she began to recount the night in vivid detail. She told me about the bar, the conversations, how Daniel had been attentive and charming. She described the moment they left together, how he had walked her to a quiet corner of the park nearby, where they sat and talked. And then, she hesitated. "What is it?" I asked gently, placing a hand on her knee. "He kissed me," she said, her voice barely audible. "And?" "I let him. Just for a moment." Her words sent a jolt through me, not of anger or jealousy, but of raw, electrifying emotion. I took a deep breath, my mind racing, and squeezed her hand. "And how did it feel?" I asked, my voice steady. She looked at me, her gaze searching. "It felt exciting. But the whole time, I kept thinking about you. About how this was something we were doing together." Her honesty brought a sense of relief and connection that I hadn't expected. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close as she rested her head against my chest. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "For being so open." That night, as we lay in bed, Klara curled against me, I realized that we had crossed a line we could never uncross. But instead of fear, I felt exhilaration. We were navigating this together, learning and growing with every step. And for the first time, I understood that this journey wasn't about limits, it was about discovering how far we were willing to go, together. The night Klara kissed Daniel marked a turning point for us, one that neither of us could have fully anticipated. We had stepped beyond what we thought we were capable of, into a space that felt both thrilling and uncharted. But instead of pulling us apart, it drew us closer together. The intimacy we shared in those moments afterward, when she told me everything, her words honest and unguarded, felt like a bond being forged anew. For days, I replayed her story in my mind. I thought about how she had navigated the situation, how she had balanced her curiosity with her commitment to us. I marveled at her courage, her openness, and the way she had embraced this journey without losing herself. It wasn't just her that I was falling in love with all over again, it was the us that we were becoming. Klara seemed to feel it too. She was lighter, more at ease, as if some unseen weight had been lifted from her shoulders. We talked more than ever, about everything, her thoughts, her feelings, and what this meant for our relationship. One evening, as we were sitting together on the couch, she reached for my hand and gave me a look that was both tender and determined. "Johan," she began, "I need you to know something. What we're doing, it's not just about fulfilling your fantasy. It's about me discovering parts of myself I didn't know existed. And it's about us, about trusting each other completely. That's what makes this so special." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I nodded, squeezing her hand. "I feel the same way," I said. "This isn't just a fantasy anymore. It's about growing together, about understanding each other in ways we never imagined." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "So," she said playfully, "what's next?" What was next? That question lingered in the air for days as we both pondered the possibilities. We had come so far already, but it was clear that we were standing at the edge of something even bigger. One evening, Klara proposed an idea that made my heart race. "I've been thinking," she said as we sat together after dinner. "What if we planned something more intentional? Not just letting things happen, but creating a situation where we can both explore this together? I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? She hesitated for a moment, then continued. There's this bar downtown. It's known for being a little unconventional. People go there to meet others, to flirt, to connect. What if we went together? I could explore, and you could watch. See everything firsthand. The idea was electrifying. The thought of being there with her, seeing her charm and confidence up close, was something I hadn't dared to imagine. But it also made me nervous. This wasn't just about hearing her stories anymore, it was about being part of them in a very real way. I'm in, I said after a moment, my voice steady. As long as you're comfortable with it. Klara's smile was radiant. I am, she said. And I think it could be amazing. The night of our outing arrived, and I could feel the anticipation crackling between us as we got ready. Klara chose a sleek, midnight blue dress that clung to her figure in all the right places, paired with strappy heels and a touch of red lipstick. She looked stunning, and I told her so. You're going to be the center of attention, I said as we left the house. That's the idea, she replied with a playful wink. The bar was exactly as she had described, dimly lit, with a sultry atmosphere and a crowd that seemed open and uninhibited. We found a small table near the edge of the room, giving me a clear view of the action while Klara took her place at the bar. Watching her was like seeing a masterpiece come to life. She was radiant, magnetic, drawing attention without even trying. It didn't take long for someone to approach her, a tall man with an easy smile and a confident demeanor. I watched as they struck up a conversation, her laughter carrying over the low hum of the room. Every gesture, every glance, felt deliberate, yet natural. As the evening progressed, I saw her connect with not just him, but with others as well, men and women alike. She was in her element, completely at ease, and it was a sight to behold. My emotions were a whirlwind: pride, excitement, even a touch of jealousy, but above all, I felt a deep sense of connection to her. This wasn't just her journey, it was ours. At one point, Klara turned and caught my eye. She gave me a small, knowing smile, a signal that reminded me we were still completely in sync. It was as if she was saying, "This is for us." When the night finally wound down, we left the bar hand in hand. Klara was glowing, her eyes sparkling with excitement. As we got into the car, she leaned over and kissed me deeply, her passion leaving no doubt about how she felt. "Thank you," she whispered against my lips. "For trusting me. For doing this with me." Back at home, Klara told me everything: the conversations, the flirtations, the way it had felt to let herself be free. She spoke with a mix of excitement and vulnerability, her words weaving a tapestry of emotions that made me feel closer to her than ever before. As she finished, she looked at me, her expression soft but serious. "Are you still okay with all of this?" she asked. "With how far we're going?" I cupped her face in my hands, my heart full. "Klara," I said, "I'm more than okay. I've never felt closer to you than I do right now. This isn't just about what we're doing, it's about who we are together. And I wouldn't trade that for anything." That night, as we lay tangled together, I realized something profound. This journey we were on wasn't about limits or boundaries, it was about trust, love, and the unshakable connection we shared. It was about discovering who we could be when we let go of fear and embraced each other fully. The future stretched out before us, full of possibilities. And for the first time in my life, I felt like we were truly free. Whatever came next, I knew we would face it together, hand in hand, hearts open, and stronger than ever.